Welcome to Journey In, a show that aims to offer you new and expanding perspectives when it comes to defining your spirituality. These days, more and more of us are craving a deeper connection to something bigger than ourselves. I created this show to not only share about my personal journey, but to create a space to have conscious conversation around different spiritual modalities, health and wellness trends, and to hear from spiritual thought leaders so that we can come together and respect one another despite our spiritual beliefs and differences. At the end of the day, a spiritual journey is a homecoming to who you really are, and you get to define what that path looks like. It can be messy, hard, and confusing. We're going to journey through it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jess Montasia, and let's journey in. Welcome back to the show. We are at the end of Cancer season, or we've actually completely completed Cancer season at the time of this recording and at the time of this episode release, and we are at the very beginning of Leo season and the 13 sign system. And that being said, I really just wanted to take this episode to reflect on Cancer season. If you're on my email list, you know I did a brief introduction to Cancer season in when we first entered it. And so Cancer season in the 13 sign system is from July 17th through August 6th. So we just exited it. And the reason why I've been releasing more of like reflection episodes around each zodiac season right after they end is because I think it encourages a more inward approach to astrology where you can reflect and see how the season felt for you and how the energies felt for you, and if you even felt them in any way and what that really looked like. Because I find with astrological forecasts, it's very predictive, and it can tell you how your Cancer season is going to play out when that may be completely not the case. If that makes sense, because that's something that I have, kind of struggled with, is when I used to tune into zodiac updates and astrological forecasts, I would expect certain things to happen, and I would expect that time period to be and feel a certain way. And so I just don't think that just doesn't feel resonant for me. And it would push me into fight or flight sometimes. And so I think that just taking this approach to it, where you can really reflect and look at how each season actually felt for you, and if it even aligned with certain energies of Cancer or each zodiac season or not. I just think it's a much more empowering approach to astrology. So that's what we're doing today. We're talking all about Cancer season. And Cancer season, like I said, it just came and went. I mean, it is a smaller constellation. It's only a few weeks long. So I remember when we were getting into it, I was like, ooh, Cancer season, it's going to be slow and juicy and yummy. And for me, it wasn't necessarily slow. I've been actually so busy. I feel like my life has really picked up, but that also kind of makes sense because Cancer is also a cardinal sign, and cardinal sign is a very initiatory sign. It's like a sign of action, or cardinal signs are, rather. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But I also, at the same time, was feeling super emotional, processing a lot of emotions around my personal life, and feeling like I did not want to show up on social media. I didn't want to show up on my podcast. I was just like feeling like I was so in certain emotions that it felt like it was just for me to be in those emotions, which is really interesting because Cancer is a very private energy. Cancers tend to like to keep their inner world very private. And so I think that that's just something that was really interesting and something that I was noticing for myself. And Cancer is also a really reflective sign, really, really reflective, like loves to reflect on the past, and can sometimes actually get stuck in the past. Like if people have like their south node in Cancer, I'm always like, okay, make sure you don't get, be cautious not to get too stuck in the past, because that placement can indicate like a tendency to do so. And Cancer placements in general, it can just be really easy to ruminate on the past. And I'm speaking from experience because I have my Mars sign in Cancer. And so Cancer energy definitely does show up for me. So it's really important to be able to reflect on the past, but use it in a way of like moving forward. And so I noticed for me that, I took a trip to visit my best friend in Denver, and we were having so many conversations just about like the past and doing a lot of reflection. And I was just sharing into like past relationships and past experiences with different friends. And I was noticing that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like it's been such a reflective time. But it was like such a great way for me to see how far I've grown in so many capacities, especially when it comes to relationships, which I'll talk more about probably in the future. But yeah, it's just been so interesting. And that's really a lot of how Cancer's energy showed up for me. And it was definitely an emotional period for me as well. Just processing emotions within my personal life. And Cancer is a very emotional sign. It's a water sign. So in general, all the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And all like characteristics of water signs are very empathetic, very emotional, and very attuned to energetics and kind of like what's unseen. And so this is just something to notice. Maybe these past few weeks you were very in touch with your emotions. You were very in touch with how you were feeling or you were processing. It's definitely an emotive energy. But it's also, when it's not emoting, when Cancers or anyone with Cancer placements are not expressing their emotions or allowing their emotions to like really flow through them, that is when the shadows come up, which shadows of Cancer are being moody, passive aggressive, being cold. Like I've heard some people that have prominent Cancer placements tell me like, yeah, people sometimes think that I'm like very cold and just like rigid. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Are you processing your emotions? And are you, giving yourself that space to feel? Because Cancers tend to just kind of like shell up. That's why the animal archetype of Cancer is the crab. It's like this hard exterior with this very soft, delicate center. Cancers are so delicate and so soft on the inside, but on the outside, they can sometimes appear like they just have no emotions whatsoever. And that's so far beyond the case. And I'm even thinking of one of my favorite podcasters. She's a Leo sun in mainstream, but she's a mainstream Western astrology, but she's a Cancer sun in this system. And just the way she kind of comes off like she has no emotions, but I've heard her talking on her podcast and she's like, I'm just a deeply private person. And I was like, oh my God, she's such a Cancer. But anyways, this is how my brain works. So definitely can have a tendency, if you're not processing your emotions, to shell up and even to be resentful, because Cancers love family. Family is like, it's such a family oriented sign, and Cancers love to give to the ones they love, and they love to receive that love in return. So sometimes they can become resentful if they are over giving and not taking care of themselves, or not feeling like they're receiving love in return. Ultimately, like Cancer is such a sign of just learning love and learning how to feel, and like love for oneself and also love for others. And again, it's a very family oriented sign, like really, really cares about the people that are closest to them. And remember, family doesn't have to be blood family. It can be the people that you decide are your family. And so this could have been a time too where you were really focusing on family matters, or just really nurturing your closest relationships, because Cancer again is a very nurturing energy. It's a very like it's like the divine mother. It's very loving, very just unconditional love. And so you could have noticed that these past few weeks were really bringing you into that, maybe for yourself or also for the people that you love the most. And it's also ruled by the moon. So you can look to your moon placement in your chart to get some more, individualized guidance as to how the energy of Cancer may have been affecting you. But it's really, the moon is a very, very feminine sign. And Cancer is definitely, I would say Cancer season was definitely an invitation into like your feminine, your divine feminine. And when we think of the feminine, that's all aspects of receiving, of flow, of being instead of doing. And for me personally, my feminine, I feel connected to my feminine, but it's hard sometimes. Like my masculine always wants to just go, go, go. I mean, I have a Sagittarius moon, which is a masculine sign, and I really love to move forward. I'm also a manifesting generator, so I really like to move fast. But definitely these past few weeks, I've been noticing the invite to like slow down and to just be and to process. And it hasn't been the most comfortable energy, to be completely honest, but it's so essential to the human experience to really like process our emotions and to really sit with them and be with them. And that's a big, big element of Cancer. And it's so funny because I was talking to one of my friends and I was sharing the 13 sign system with her for the first time. And she's spiritual. She's knows her big three in mainstream Western astrology. And she was telling me how she's always been so like deeply connected to the moon, like ever since she was a little girl. And I asked her if she has any Cancer placements, like in prominent Cancer placements. I was like, oh, is Cancer in your big three? Big three is your sun, moon, rising. And she was like, no. And I was like, oh my God, what? I was like, I'm so surprised to hear you say that. And I was just like, we need to look up your 13 sign chart. And she was like, let's do it. And so we plugged in we're at happy hour and we just plug in her birth information and I pull up her 13 sign chart and lo and behold, she's a Cancer moon. And I was like, dude, you're a Cancer moon. And she was like, what? And I forget what her moon sign was in mainstream, but I was like, this is nuts to me. And also so not surprising because that's the thing is like people have asked me to guess their zodiac signs before. And I always hesitate because I'm like, okay, well, the way that I'm guessing is probably more aligned with the 13 sign system. Um, Anyways, that's like a whole nother tangent. But it was just wild. And ever since then, she's been like so intrigued by the 13 sign system. And she definitely felt such like a strong connection to being a Cancer moon, being that she's like literally been so connected to the moon her entire life. And our moon sign is like our inner world. It represents our emotions, it represents what we need to feel emotionally fulfilled and satisfied. This is really a good placement to look at when you're looking at synergies between two people is like how can you cater to your partner or whoever you're dating based on their moon sign and giving them what they need. And that is a really cool way to use astrology in partnership. It's given me so much insight into my partner personally and also into what my needs are as really just exploring that. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful tool to really look at. And I always say there's so much bullshit out there about like which signs are most compatible and just all these like bullshit quizzes and stuff pop up on my Instagram about like compatibility based on your zodiac. And the only thing that you need to be compatible with someone based on your zodiac signs is a willingness to be there for each other, and a willingness to give each other what you need. And that's what I always tell people. I'm always like, sure, maybe some signs might be naturally more compatible with each other, but what it comes down to is like any sign can be compatible with any sign as long as you're willing to see that person fully and completely for who they are and allow them to be that way and cater to what they need and also be able to receive that in return. And so the moon sign is a really beautiful way to just look at compatibility. And I love looking at it in that light. And for me, it's been so interesting because, in mainstream Western astrology, I'm a Capricorn moon, but in this system, I'm a Sagittarius moon. And that was something I remember when I was learning my when I was in my Western astrology certification and I was learning deeply about my chart, I remember, and this has happened a few times with my intuition, looking at different charts. I remember like sitting with my Capricorn moon and like being like, God, like I just like don't feel this. I don't feel connected to this. It doesn't feel like me. And Capricorn is a very ambitious sign, tends to definitely be well known as the sign of career, of providing for oneself, which are all elements of it. But there's so many more elements to Capricorn too. That's just like scratching the surface. But I don't know, intuitively, I just felt like this just isn't who I am. And then when I learned about my 13 sign chart, I mean, that just blasted me open in so many ways. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a Sagittarius moon. And, in Western, I had been a Sagittarius sun. So I had already connected with Sagittarius energy, but it was a whole new way of like looking at myself and getting that reflection back to myself from my astrology chart. And the number one thing that I've always desired in my life above everything is freedom. And that is freedom in all forms, like financial freedom, freedom within my schedule, freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want. That's just like a goal of mine in my life and always has been. And that is such an element. Like Sagittarius loves freedom. And it's like that is emotionally nourishing to me, is when I have freedom in my day to do as I please and not feel held back. And that is really, really important for me, like so massive. Always the number one thing for me that whenever I'm asked what I want is like freedom in my life. And not only that, but Sagittarius is a very spiritual sign, and I'm definitely very spiritual, but like my spirituality gives me emotional nourishment. Like I really just learning about different spiritual modalities and everything is like so emotionally nourishing for me. And so that's also an aspect of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius also embodies like higher education. And I went back to school for holistic nutrition when I was 25 and had already had my undergrad degree. And I remember that whole process was also very emotionally nourishing for me. So it was just very interesting for me to like look back on my life and see how the traits of Sagittarius really do embody emotional nourishment for me. And so that is just, the moon sign is such a beautiful way to reflect on oneself and what you need. And of course, as always, see what resonates and what doesn't, because another aspect of Sagittarius is traveling. And I have always desired to like really travel the world, but I also get really exhausted from traveling. So that's something I'm still playing with and seeing what that looks like for me. But I also have my son in the fourth house, and fourth house is a very like home, cozy house. It's also the traditional house of Cancer. And so it's like this feeling of wanting freedom and wanting to explore, but also I also have an energy of like needing a home base because fourth house is all about like the home. And exploring and new experiences, though, those are super big for Sagittarius. And I love new experiences. Like, even the other day, I have a coffee shop that is right next to my apartment, and I go there often. And yesterday, I was out and about running errands, and I was just like, I really want to stop and get a coffee. And I was like, I guess I could go to the one that's right by my apartment. But I was like, oh no, like I just want to go somewhere new. And so I went somewhere different. And it was just like that little like act of going somewhere different. Ugh, it felt so good for me. And so those are all just examples of, for me, with my Sagittarius moon and how I get emotional nourishment. And so I really encourage you to reflect on your moon sign, because, and see if just what aspects or elements of it may have been coming up for you in these past few weeks, being that we were just in Cancer season and Cancer is ruled by the moon. And so yeah, I really love connecting with astrology in this way and seeing how you can really find individualized guidance from it. And so I also had a client who is a Leo sun, and in mainstream Western astrology, she's a Leo sun and a Leo rising. And when she first heard me talking about the 13 sign system, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so interested to learn what my big three are, because I don't fully resonate with what my big three are in mainstream Western astrology. And so I was like, oh, why not? And she was like, well, I'm a Leo sun and a Leo rising, and people are always just like so surprised to hear that I'm a Leo, because like I do embody aspects of Leo in the terms of like being a leader and being very performative, because those are traits of Leo. But she was like, I'm also like very reserved, and I'm just like reserved. And so people are always surprised to hear that I'm a Leo. And so I pull her chart, and lo and behold, she's still a Leo sun, but she's a Cancer rising. And I was like, this makes so much sense, because your rising sign, it basically flavors your sun sign and your moon sign. And so a Leo sun with a Cancer rising is so different than a Leo sun with a Leo rising. Okay, like Leo sun, Leo rising is like out there in your face, like center of attention, probably an actor or something, like always wants to be in the spotlight and is like very outspoken about it, a very outgoing energy. Whereas, like, for this client, being a Leo sun and a Cancer rising, like, yes, she has those qualities of Leo in her that are to be a leader and to perform. I mean, she, had a background of being a professional dancer. And yet, it having her Cancer rising, it really flavors her Leo sun in a way of like being a lot more private and being a lot more reserved, really, which is exactly the wording that she used. And it is just so wild to me. And she told me, we ended up doing a reading together, and she told me, like, wow, like I feel so seen. And she was like, I never did a reading in astrology. Like, I've never really gravitated toward it super deeply, because I just never felt the resonance with, having so much Leo energy in my chart. And now I feel seen. I feel like this is like so reflective of like who I am. And that's why I just think it's just so crazy to me, you guys. Like, you cannot make this shut up. And I'm just always so baffled when I hear about how people resonate with the 13 sign system. And so just some examples to share with you there. But anyways, we're going to go back a little bit into Cancer's energy. And also, okay, I've been watching Grey's Anatomy lately, rewatching it, which I've kind of stopped now because it's honestly kind of annoying. I don't know, like, they all have god complexes, which I really did not realize like the first time I watched it through, which was a while ago. And anyways, I watched it through probably to, I don't know, like season 6. And I just have to say, as I'm watching, I'm like thinking of what every character's zodiac sign is. And so I'm going to use this as an example because I think it's such a great example. But for my Grays fans out there, Dr. Bailey is like through and through a Cancer sign. And same with Izzy. Let me tell you why, because even though cancers are like such soft and emotive signs and like they're very empathetic, they're very intuitive, they are also like, if they get crossed, it's like, don't fuck with me. Or if like anyone that they love gets crossed, it's a very like, don't fuck with me energy, like claws come out. And if you've watched Grey's Anatomy, you know Dr. Bailey is like literally, she's so emotional, she's so loving, especially toward like patients, and she grows to be very loving toward all of, Meredith and all the interns. She's basically like their work mom, which is also an aspect of Cancer. Cancer is a very mama bear energy, very like leader of the pack. And so as I'm watching, I'm just like, okay, this is so crazy. Dr. Bailey is like a Cancer through and through because she has that mama bear energy. She like takes on all the interns and she grows to like love them so much. And yet when they piss her off, she just fucking goes off on them. And I think it's hilarious. Like hilarious. And so she is such a great example of a Cancer, in my opinion. So that's just a fun example of, you know, who's a Cancer. So, because cancers, again, they feel so much, they're so empathetic, they can have a tendency to develop that hard exterior to life, right? And so sometimes people will say they're rigid, they're cold, they're unemotional, when in reality, the exact opposite is true. And sometimes, like, they just feel so much that that's where the shell comes up. And so, the evolved Cancer really knows how to make space to process what they're feeling, to allow for waves of emotion to pass over without judgment. I mean, this is not easy to do, right? Like, I'm still really learning that, is how to allow my emotions to move through me without having to label them all the time. It's so much easier said than done. But anyways, so wrapping this up a bit, I would just encourage you to just take some time and like look back on the past few weeks and see like, how did Cancer's energy show up for you? What was emotionally nourishing for you? What do you need to feel emotionally nourished? And you can look to your moon sign for that if you'd like. But notice if you were moving through a lot of emotions, notice if you were wanting to be more inward, and just reflect and just take time to sit with it. And also notice like Cancer season was really an invitation into your feminine. And so noticing if you were allowing in support in certain ways, if you were allowing in receptivity, if you were allowing in space to just be with yourself. And I'm going to be bringing a lot more of embodying feminine energy onto the podcast. And I'm so, so excited about it. But it's something that is still kind of moving through me and that I'm still really working with. But I'm so excited to, I find that this is something that's very challenging for a lot of women because we're so conditioned to be in our masculine. We're so conditioned to, in the way that we work in a very masculine society in terms of like working every single day, 5 days a week, having to show up and be the same every single day, when in reality, we're cyclical beings. And, there's weeks where we're on our period and like literally our brains can't think the same way as when we're in like our luteal phase. We can't like plan as much. We can't, it's a much more inward time for us. And so this is a very real thing. So definitely an aspect that I'm going to be bringing onto the podcast more. But for now, I just really invite you to notice if you have been connected to your feminine and reflect on that as you look back on what these past few weeks were, and notice now that we are in Leo season. And so, more to come on Leo. Leo is such a spicy, fun energy, but it's also a very like heartfelt energy. And so, I'm definitely going to, of course, be bringing some of that Leo energy onto the pod. I honestly have so much to say about Leo. I'm a Leo rising and I have my Chiron in Leo, which is like the wounded healer. So much to say on that. But so we're in Leo season from August 7th through September 14th. So we have a little over a month to sit with this energy, to play with this energy. This energy is all about like, let's fucking play. I don't give a fuck. And so we're going from Cancer, which is like this super deep, emotive, powerful feminine energy, into Leo, which is this like fun, charismatic, playful, like literally just wants to have fun, fuck around and find out kind of energy. So we're moving into that. I'm going to leave it there. And of course, if you guys have any questions on this, please let me know. Let me know what you thought of this episode. And I am offering 13 sign evolutions at the moment. So if you are curious about learning and deepening into your 13 sign chart with me, that is the best way to do so. I actually just did one for someone who has a Cancer moon and a Cancer South node. And so that was so interesting to just, especially in the midst of Cancer season, I sent it to her like right when we were starting Cancer season. It was so interesting to be able to write that out for her. And it was just so profound. So if you would like to work with me in that capacity, I will leave all that information in the show notes. But in the meantime, enjoy this start to Leo season, and I'll see you guys next time.